Jason, we can't hear the boardroom. I see Chair Davenport speaking.
This morning, we reviewed the proposal and the proposed amendments to at our last meeting in May, and now it's before us for action. And Provost Croson, would you please walk us through?
Thank you, Chair Davenport and members of the committee. As Chair Davenport mentioned, the proposed changes to the Board of Regents policy student education records before you today were described in detail in your May meeting. Stacy Tidball provided that explanation, and she is here virtually to assist me with any questions before your vote. You may recall that Ms. Tidball is Director of Continuity and Compliance in Academic Support Resources and the university's Student Data Privacy Officer. She's been in that role since 2014, and she holds a law degree from the University of Minnesota. I understand there have been some questions raised about the level and extent of consultation regarding these changes. While we've documented the 30 formal consultations that were offered within the university, and those are available upon request, my remarks today will focus on consultations with interfraternity and Panhellenic executive councils, and additionally with the Minnesota Greek Alumni Council, which goes by MGAC. As a reminder, this policy change was spurred by an MSA resolution passed on December 4th, 2018, which requested enhanced protection of student confidential information and called upon us to place students' emails, addresses, and phone numbers into a limited directory category. In February 2019, the Interfraternity Council voted with a 2/3 majority to support and co-sponsor the MSA resolution. That same month, the resolution was discussed with the Panhellenic Council, who also supported it and requested no changes. In fall 2019, the Office of the Board of Regents notified the Office of the Provost that the student education records policy was due for regular review. The administration thus opened the policy for review and merged the MSA efforts and the comprehensive review process. The administration worked closely with Mr. Austin Kraft, who at the time served as student representative to the Board of Regents and MSA member, to develop and widely consult the edits to the policy which are before you today. At that time, members of MGAC expressed concerns that the policy would prevent their current practice of accessing contact information for the incoming class for recruitment purposes. Due to the importance of the relationship with MGAC and of Greek life on our campus, we embarked on the development of a memorandum of understanding. During the months of January and February 2019, the Office for Student Affairs, the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life, the Minnesota Greek Alumni Council, the Office of Undergraduate Education, and the Office of General Counsel met to discuss possibilities. Unfortunately, the parties did not come to an agreement on an MOU at that time. Progress on the policy change was delayed due to the pandemic, when attention was necessarily diverted to other matters. We noted that this issue resurfaced in February 2020 when a university student collaborated on a bill introduced into the state legislature requesting strengthened privacy provisions. Student concerns regarding directory information come up every year and are handled by a variety of offices. Concerns expressed include not understanding how someone outside the university received contact information, bogus or inappropriate job listings marketed to students, and more general information security and privacy concerns. Student advocacy related to this policy has robustly continued since the 2018 resolution. The policy amendments were again advanced beginning March 30th, 21, when the policy was posted as part of the newly developed academic policy review process. Messages were sent beginning March 30 and into April 21 to the Senate Committee on Student Affairs, student governance organizations on all 5 campuses, the Alumni Association and Foundation, and the system campus registrars with FERPA responsibilities. No suggestions for any edits were received at that time. The administration understands that these changes will alter the timing of the current process of communicating with incoming students. Currently, an external representative of MGAC files DPA requests and receives student contact information during the summer. Under the proposed policy, as student organizations, fraternities and sororities affiliated with the Office for Fraternity and Sorority Life will be able to get student information on the first day of classes rather than during the summer. We continue to explore mechanisms through which these organizations can communicate with incoming students in advance of the first day of classes. One planned process involves the organizations sending messages to the Office of Fraternity and Student Life, who would then forward them on to students. These messages could be sent over the summer, as is the current practice. We note that this is not an option that's been offered to any other organizations. As a result of discussion at the Board of Regents May 21 meeting, we further engaged with the Interfraternity Council's executive board members. Its president, Mr. Jackson Deal, provided the following statement. Given the proposed policy change going before the Board of Regents, the Interfraternity Council Executive Board has discussed our current stance and fully agree with the Council's original decision to support the resolution on the assumption that the Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life will send out summer mailings to incoming students. In a meeting on June 3rd, 21, with representatives of the MGAC, we discussed additional possibilities, including an opt-in option for students to share their contact information before the first day of classes, at which point organizations could contact them directly. We also discussed enhancing fraternity and sororities' physical presence at orientation. We commit to continue to engage with this group and others to identify actions that will simultaneously enable these organizations to effectively recruit and will protect our students' privacy as they request it. This concludes my remarks. I recommend this policy change. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and thank you for circling back after our main conversation. Before we move to discussion, I would entertain a motion to adopt the amendments to the Board of Regents policy, student education records, effective August 1.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Oh, I have a question.
Regent Hipsch?
Chair Davenport so question I got was on the Greek Council. So you believe that the Greek Council is okay with this revised policy the way it is? And it's not going to hamper their ability to conduct as they have? We don't want to make their life more difficult, right?
Provost Croson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Hitch. So okay is probably stronger than I would go. I think there's continued concern, there's continued discussion, but we remain committed to enabling these organizations to continue to recruit and protecting our students' privacy. And I think figuring out how to do that is going to take some continued collaboration.
Regent Rocha.
Well, just a quick follow-up.
Please.
Regent Davenport. So this is kind of it can change in the future for the Greek Council as we go forward to make it better for their opinion? Yeah.
Absolutely. We are happy to continue to work with them.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Regent.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, Provost Croson. So I am very much in support of the intent of protecting this data, this information. This is a long way from the world of my undergraduate days, and I believe Regent Hipsch was just a little before me, where the directory came out in a phone book and that had people's home address and just a lot of information, but accessing people was not quite as easy as it is in the technological age. And so I think that the intent here is absolutely on, and I think that the overwhelming majority of the proposed changes are on point with that. My concern, and I was pretty active with the Greek system at the time. I was held Mr. Deal's position at one point, and we were always trying to find that balance between the positive aspects of the Greek system and how we promote that and how that creates community at the university, but also recognizing that we were part of the university as a whole. And so when you point out that this has only been offered to the Greeks, I bristle at that a little bit. But not even so much from an equity standpoint or a fairness standpoint, but my personal experience, I think, is like a lot of students now, where people are applying to and being admitted to 3, 4, 5 schools. And the information that I got from student organizations at the university while I was still a senior in high school had a huge impact on me choosing this school. And so by suppressing this information until the first day you're in class, if other institutions are allowing student organizations and other aspects of campus to reach out to those students, they're going to find a connection with those schools. And when they're trying to choose between us and another top tier school, we may find ourselves losing some very quality students. So I'm very concerned about the change in the definition of student to someone who is sitting in class. I don't see a huge distinction between that and a student who's intending to come here or a student who is in between their first and second or second and third years when they're not actually enrolled or sitting in a classroom. So I want to pursue the protections that are in this. I'm just very concerned that there's not a better process for all university student organizations and other departments to be able to access and get information to students to explain to them why this is where you want to be. And these are things that you can be involved in. Because I think in the first several months of school, you really define what your activities are oftentimes for your whole academic experience. And so one of the things that we did do for the agricultural fraternities on the St. Paul campus, we didn't participate in formal rush. But what we were able to do through the College of Agriculture, when it was a standalone college, is we presented the materials we wanted sent out, and then they sent them out. But that happened in the spring. And as students were admitted, we were informed when there were more students, and we could then continue that process. So we were reaching out to students who were also considering Iowa State and Texas A&M and all these other schools, explaining to them what we offer here. And that, I think, had a big part of a lot of students choosing us over other schools. So I'm a little bit concerned, and I don't know if you can speak to this, Provost Croson, but what can we do to ensure the full range of student organizations on campus that would want to reach out to students and invite them to participate here on this campus? How do we provide that opportunity as we have in the past, which I think is more relevant now than ever because it's so easy to apply to many schools?
Provost Croson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davenport. Thank you, Regent Rocha. I might call on Ms. Tidball to talk about exactly who has access to these contact information before the first day of classes, because perhaps it's a wider set than we're thinking about.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Tidball. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair Davenport and Regent Rocha, members of the board. I think to start with, I want to point out that part of what we are dealing with is a particular process that MGAC is interested in, and that's what we're continuing to discuss as far as getting them, quote, early access. However, that doesn't mean that our other student organizations don't have access. It just hasn't been part of this most recent conversation. So our student organizations are absolutely being promoted to incoming students through admissions and orientation, and they're working through those administrative options now, and they appear to be satisfied with that, and it seems to be working to get our students that early information, because I wholeheartedly agree that having students understand the breadth of our campus life opportunities here is really important to showing our student experience and what we have to offer.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. It puts me in kind of an awkward spot because there's a difference between just simply letting them know what we have versus letting those organizations reach out and connect. Because it was the connection that was important to me. Receiving a letter inviting me to an event or inviting me to consider membership, that was really important. And so, I mean, as it relates to the change right now, I tend to be persuaded by our undergraduate response that was read by the provost in support. But I also have the skepticism of age that I want it to be more than just we're going to work on it. I mean, if we have an assurance right now that we will have a process in place where organizations can communicate with incoming students, within a reasonable time of their admission to the university, then I can support the language as written. But if we can't make that assurance right now, I don't know that I'm comfortable because I think that's a very important part of student life.
Provost Croson about assurance.
Yes, thank you, Regent Davenport, Regent Rocha. So my understanding is that those organizations already do contact students. Again, I would yield to Ms. Tidball if she has a different perspective, but they don't do it by sending messages directly, right? They draft the messages get passed through.
So, Madam Chair, I apologize for trying to dominate this, but then that change in the definition of student is really important, because in the past, you could access that information, whether you paid for it or otherwise, as soon as a person was considered a student under the old definition. But now that it has to be when you're sitting in class, they won't be able to have direct communication until the first day of classes when people are sitting there, which would end the traditional process, at least for those student organizations in the Greek system, let alone other student organizations that may have something similar. So I'm not hearing that there will be that outreach by student life until somebody's actually sitting in class on the first day, which I think disadvantages the university.
Provost Croson, or?
Yes, so thank you, Chair Davenport. Thank you, Chair Rocha. Let me yield to Ms. Tidball again, because my understanding is that those contacts do happen. What will not happen is the release of the list. And those are distinct things. But let me ask Stacy to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Rocha, members of the board. So there's a distinction, I think, and it's admittedly trying not to go too far into the weeds here, as they say, but if you're accessing the list on the grounds that it's public data, we are changing the timing of that access. But if you're accessing that list on the grounds that you have a legitimate educational interest in the data, that's not going to change the timing. And so when we have these staff pass-throughs of messages where we don't have to actually give out a public version of the list to someone, quote, outside of the university, we're relying on that legitimate educational interest in the student data and can use it with our current timing. So the changes before you will not be blocking our internal use of that information, which includes passing through those student organization marketing materials and messages, if you will. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, thank you. Thank you for that. I will take it as these organizations will continue to be able to reach these students in a timely way that is good for the institution and good for various student organizations across the university, not just necessarily in the Greek system. And we'll just monitor it as we go. But I'll support it today under that understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Moving on, we have Regent Kenyanya. Welcome.
Thank you.
There
Thank
you
you. You can hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, Provost Croson and AVP Tidball. Really appreciate that conversation that was just had. My question is now more about external parties. And in rereading this, as usual, I'm a little confused. So I'm hoping someone could kind of clarify and guide me on this, on what these changes, how these changes affect external parties going forward. I'm more concerned about external parties getting access to that information, be it a Rocha Legal Group or New Life Farms or whatnot. So can someone speak to that, and then I'll have a follow-up question.
Provost Croson, please.
Yes, let me yield to Ms. Tidball to talk about exactly what the impacts of the changes are for outside parties.
Ms. Tidball.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Kenyanya. So the change that we're talking about really is around directory information. And what we're doing is our current directory information includes students' relationship with the university in a broad sense. So what their major is, what their college is, their advisor, awards and honors, all of that will remain public. And so someone making a public data request could still, if a student hadn't suppressed that information, get a list of students' names, their majors, their college, what program they're in essentially. And they could also find out their anticipated graduation year or have their degree confirmed. What won't be in that sphere anymore, that fully public sphere, is the student's contact information. So their email, their home address, their phone number, their cell phone number, which we have previously had public and would have been part of public data requests. That change really only affects our, as you say, those external organizations. It doesn't affect anyone that's designated as a school official, which is a fairly broad definition here at the university. It won't affect our student groups. except for some of the timing things that we've just been speaking about. And it won't affect parties that we might think of as external, but are essentially part of the institution through an official formal contractual relationship where we've made data privacy and data sharing agreements.
Quick
Madam Chair.
follow-up, Regent Kenyanya.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the clarification, AVP Tidball. And so for that information that is still accessible to external parties, or my apologies, the address, the phone number, is that suppressed until the new definition, the first day, or that's suppressed throughout unless they go and change it?
Ms. Tidball.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Kenyanya. So students' information has the default of being public, even the directory information that we have defaults as being public, which is why we inform them at orientation and other spots early in their student career about, if they want to, how they can suppress that information. And then the student would have to proactively make that choice through MyU. It's a relatively simple process, but they would have to proactively elect it.
Madam Chair?
Quickly, we're running behind.
Yeah,
Regent Kenyanya.
Thank you. So on the first day of classes, their address and that other information will switch to being available to an external party upon request?
Ms. Tidball.
Regent, thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Kenyanya. Actually, no, the stuff that we have in that limited directory would not become fully publicly available to external organizations. It really merely becomes available within how we've defined our university community in the policy.
That answers it. Thank you very much, Ms. Tidball. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And Regent Mayron.
Yes, I just wanted to emphasize that I think anything we can do before an individual becomes a student to allow that potential student to opt in, whether for communications from fraternities, sororities, and student organizations during that window of from acceptance until they show up as a student, I think is as important as letting them know about the process to suppress the information once they become a student. So giving this responsibility to the student and the authority on how their information can be used, I think as early on as we can do it would be a good thing.
Thank you, Regent Mayron. So we're hearing the importance of relationship building tied with data privacy respect. Seeing no other comments or questions, we'll use voice votes this time during this meeting. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed say no. The motion passes. Thank you. Good discussion. Our next item for discussion is Engage Scholarship. And something to be proud of, I think. Provost Croson, would you like to introduce the item and presenters?
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the committee. The topic of this presentation is Engaged Scholarship. And I'm going to offer a little introduction and introduce our presenters who are here virtually. So by engaged, we mean engaging with the public and our many communities in order to do our work together. While engagement enhances university efforts across all parts of our mission, teaching, research, outreach, the scope of today's presentation is focused on engaged scholarship. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to use scholarship to indicate research and other creative works, so in a somewhat broad situation. In our presentation, we hope to make clear what engaged scholarship is, how it differs from traditional approaches, and why it's of value to the university, both in general and through some specific examples. I'm grateful to my colleagues who will be joining virtually for this presentation. Dr. Beverly Durgan is Dean of University Extension and Professor in the Department of Agronomy and Plant Genetics. Dr. Durgan has served as Dean since 2005. In addition to overseeing Extension's agenda and responsibilities across the state, She's an accomplished researcher and an expert in small grain weed management systems. Dr. Andrew Furco is Associate Vice President for Public Engagement and Professor of Higher Education. Prior to joining the U in 2008, he was on the faculty at UC Berkeley. Dr. Furco is a nationally recognized scholar and expert in the study and practice of community-based experiential education, whose work has involved collaboration with local school districts, state departments of education, foreign ministries of education, and state and national organizations focused on advancing student community engagement and the institutionalization of public engagement in higher education. Dr. Michael Oakes is Interim Vice President for Research and Professor in the Division of Epidemiology and Community Health. Before assuming the interim role, Dr. Oakes served as Associate Vice President for Research with responsibilities that included, among others, fostering engaged scholarship across the university. His research has focused on social epidemiology and research ethics. In 2005, the Carnegie Foundation established a classification for colleges and universities described as the Carnegie Community Engagement. Impact 25 specifically calls out our Carnegie Community Engagement designation. Currently, the Twin Cities and the Morris campuses are designated as Carnegie Engaged campuses, and the system-wide strategic plan calls for them to maintain that designation and for the Crookston, Duluth, and Rochester campuses to become so designated when they are eligible in 2025. The system-wide strategic plan also calls for the development of a database and a map that describes our engagement, which is under development. Finally, the plan includes activities designed to enhance the impact and reach of extension and drive mutual relationships with communities to better society. Engaged scholarship is one way that we accomplish these goals. So what is engaged scholarship? Engagement is not something that we do. It's a way that we do the things that we do. Each of our mission domains, research and scholarship, teaching and education, outreach and service, can be delivered in a more or a less engaged way. While we also do engaged education and engaged service, as depicted in this figure, we're going to focus today's conversation on the circled portion, engaged scholarship. In this discussion, we need to separate engagement from communication or translation of scholarship. Engagement is not about giving communities or individuals answers. It's instead about letting those communities and those individuals guide the scholars in the questions that are asked. Of the adjectives listed on this slide, and there's more in your docket, the one that most closely aligns with engagement is co-construction. In engaged scholarship, communities co-construct the scholarship. They guide the questions being asked, the methods of answering them, the data collected and how it's analyzed, and of course, how the results are disseminated as well. Not all scholarship or education or service, for that matter, is appropriate for high levels of engagement. Scholarship with less engagement is certainly of value. Much scholarship has to be done and should be done without significant outside engagement. And in many cases, such scholarship has led to discoveries that have enormous benefits to humanity and the world. But there's also much scholarship that can be improved with engagement. We believe that engagement in general is an underutilized tool in order to improve the delivery of our core mission. As a result, we've invested in empowering our faculty and staff to increase the amount and the quality of engagement in their scholarship, as well as in their other activities. So where appropriate, engaged scholarship can advance our other goals. It can, of course, produce better and more impactful research, since the researcher knows that the questions being asked and the methods used are relevant and important for their audience. It can also support faculty and student diversity, as we find that underrepresented faculty and students are often most the ones who are most committed to engaged scholarship. Finally, it advances the university's status as an engaged institution, both via the Carnegie classification and our reputation more generally. To provide some more concrete examples about how engaged scholarship works, I'd like to turn the presentation to Interim Vice President for Research, Michael Oakes, who will talk about some examples of engaged scholarship in our university system.
Thank you, Provost Croson, and especially for that definition so that I think we're broadened in our scope as we listen to VP Michael Oakes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Davenport, members of the board. Thank you. It's an honor to offer you 3 concrete examples of engaged scholarship by researchers at the university. There are many such examples, but I thought these 3 would be useful in helping you appreciate how the engaged approach fits within the university's research mission. First, with special funding from the Office of Academic and Clinical Affairs in the medical school, a multidisciplinary research team from the Duluth campus addressed known health disparities between urban and rural populations by developing a rural learning health network. Rural communities are often described as less healthy than their urban counterparts. One of the reasons for this is simply age. Recent data from the Minnesota Department of Health reveal that 44% of rural residents are age 50 and above, while just 32% of urban residents are age 50 and above. While overall mortality has been decreasing in urban areas, there's little change in rural areas, so action is needed. Instead of creating a program or intervention to address these issues from theory alone, or with preconceived ideas, University of Minnesota researchers held listening sessions with many doctors and others working in clinics, big and small, around the state. This simple step of engaging, in this case, listening, and co-creating or co-producing action plans for research is the key difference. The collaborative research revealed unanimous support for a new professional network to address these concerns, unexpectedly strong interest in collaboration with the university, ideas for data sharing, and a plan to create a collective voice to advocate for the special characteristics of rural health. Work continues with this promising project, and I hasten to add that, among other things, this work is consistent with President Gabel's Impact 25 plan. A second example. A research team led by a graduate student, Catherine Holzer, and Professor Heather Zerhut from the College of Biological Science engaged with community members in order to understand how best to share back results of genetic testing. While the science of producing genetics tests is increasingly well established, it remains unclear how to best to deliver the information, especially to persons from communities with less advantaged backgrounds, differing belief systems, or perhaps subtle genetic differences that affect pharmaceutical effectiveness. This appears especially true for Hmong persons here in Minnesota. It matters because inappropriate delivery can lead to great distress, distrust, or physical outcomes that increase known health disparities. A great deal of negative impact, if not suffering, can be averted by properly tailoring messages to the needs of the group. Instead of assuming Hmong persons should receive genetic tests in some standard way, university researchers partner with the Hmong community to figure out how best to share pharmacogenetic results. This research is one of just a few studies that have specifically addressed minority participants' reaction to receiving genomic results. The project and associated studies from the team led to improved procedures for sharing these results. Given student leadership, I think the project exemplifies our research as teaching philosophy. What is more, the effort is also consistent with President Gabel's Mintersections initiative. Finally, CFAN's Professor Mary Rogers' research program focuses on ecological strategies to improve production of vegetables and fruit, and collaborating with local growers and community members to build a more sustainable food system. She notes that the demand for high quality fruits and vegetables is increasing as our human population increases. But diminishing resources, climate change, and invasive species limits horticultural production throughout the world. Sustainable production practices are necessary in order to conserve natural resources, enhance our environment, and provide economic opportunities as we meet our food needs. With financial support from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Professor Rogers is partnering with hydroponic growers to guide research, disseminate findings, and create demonstrations and curriculum that can be integrated into pre-existing programs and reach new audiences on integrated pest management in these systems. This work is not only generating scientific impact, but also positive impact in our state. In addition, Professor Rogers helped create Growing North Minneapolis, an urban agricultural and youth development summer program located in North Minneapolis. Through a partnership with faculty from the university and North Minneapolis partners, youth interns are placed in undergraduate student mentors from the university and North Minneapolis Gardener mentors. One of the goals of the program is to develop leadership experience for undergraduate students and improve food and horticultural skills and research through this education. Youth learning and development outcomes are reported, and results point to beneficial intergenerational mentorship structure and scientific advance. Professor Rogers' community engaged research is not only consistent with President Gable's strategic plan, but I'd like to say exemplifies my office's core values of excellence, responsiveness, integrity, and impact. I now offer my colleague, Professor and Associate Vice President Andy Furco. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, VP Furco.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Davenport, members of the board. Thank you, Interim Vice President Oakes. With the growing interest in community engaged scholarship among faculty members, as well as graduate students and other scholars from across our colleagues and campuses, we have put in place a number of initiatives intentionally designed to enhance scholars' capacity to conduct community engaged scholarship. These initiatives have been developed following consultations with academic leaders and faculty members regarding the support systems they would like to have to help their community engaged scholarship and research thrive. These academic support systems are facilitated through the system-wide Office for Public Engagement, known as OPE, which works to integrate community and public engagement more fully into the university's research, teaching, and outreach agendas in ways that further the university's system-wide strategic goals mentioned earlier, as well as broader goals regarding enhancing faculty members and students' success and the furthering of the societal impact of their work. OP works in partnership with various administrative and academic units across the system in delivering these support initiatives that we see here. The docket includes fuller descriptions of the various initiatives designed to support engaged scholarship across system, but very briefly, I'll just highlight a few. So throughout the year, engaged scholars have opportunities through various workshops and professional development opportunities to develop their skills with different methodologies used specifically in the conduct of engaged research, including strategies for building trust-based, mutually beneficial partnerships with external entities, and ways to work with specific populations. These opportunities are customized to meet the needs of scholars based on the societal issues they're addressing and the communities in which they're situated. This photo on the slide here is a snapshot of a portion of the directory of community engaged scholars, the second bullet here. The directory profiles more than 400 engaged scholars representing every college and campus at the university. The directory has a search function that allows external partners to identify engaged scholars who are working on particular issues in communities. And as was noted in the docket materials, we are finding that the scholars who are seeking additional opportunities to conduct engaged scholarship are increasingly our junior faculty and our faculty of color. The President's Community Engaged Scholar Award provides recognition to scholars who conduct exemplary engaged scholarship that demonstrates advancements in knowledge in their disciplines while also providing evidence of demonstrable impact on society. These awards help elevate the visibility of scholars' impactful work across the university. We have learned over the years that finding support within one's academic department is important for engaged scholars to be able to thrive in conducting high quality community engaged research and scholarship. And the Engaged Department program supports departmental teams in developing and implementing action plans designed specifically to advance policies and practices within the departments to support public engagement and engaged scholarship. 33 academic departments across the system have implemented such plans. And lastly, there are several initiatives focused specifically on supporting tenure-line faculty who conduct engaged scholarship. We may know that the University of Minnesota was one of the first research universities in the country to revise its promotion and tenure guidelines to incorporate public engagement integrally into the review of tenure-line faculty work. And today we have several support systems in place, as are described on pages 19 and 20 of the docket, designed specifically to guide engaged scholars' advancement as tenure-line faculty. These and other initiatives presented in the docket focus on making engaged scholarship a more integral component of scholarly activities, as was mentioned by my colleagues. We continue to adapt and modify these initiatives and identify new support systems based on input we receive from scholars and others involved in community work. We see these efforts as part of an ecosystem of support activities designed to promote overall faculty success, which in turn enhances the success of our students and advances our overall mission. And with that, I now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Bev Durgan, Dean of Extension.
Thank you, AVP Furco and Dean Durgan. Welcome.
Thank you, Andy, and good morning. And thank you, Chair Davenport and board members. It's a pleasure to be with you here today to discuss Extension's mission and our role in engaged scholarship. The docket materials include a detailed description of Extension's mission and strategic plan. But as the topic is today, I will focus on one part of Extension's mission, which is engaged scholarship. University of Minnesota Extension maintains a strong statewide presence as Extension faculty and Extension educators live and work in communities across the state. Because they live in communities where they work, Extension faculty and educators are a trusted source of information and a valuable resource for communities and individuals. Listens and collaborates with individuals, organizations, and communities to develop research to address community needs as defined by the communities themselves. This research helps communities develop solutions to the challenges they face through a co-creation process. Scholarship for Extension is bi-directional. Extension is able to bring community needs to the university and for university new research opportunities, thus connect communities directly to the university and to researchers. Extension's engaged scholarship is funded by grants and gifts, results in many peer-reviewed publications every year by Extension educators and also by our joint tenure track faculty in our partner colleges. As mentioned by my colleagues, engaged scholarship leads to and more sustainable outcomes. Engaged scholarship also increases trust in the research results and leads to increased acceptance and implementation of the research, and also find additional research needs by the community. Today, I would like to describe two engaged scholarship projects that are currently being conducted by Extension educators and faculty. The first project is a partnership with the College of Pharmacy, University of Minnesota Duluth. This partnership includes county public health and health and services agencies in Itasca, Aiken, Lewis, and Pine County. We also have partnerships with 4 tribal communities, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe and the Boys Fort Band of Chippewa in Minnesota, and the Lower Brule and Crow Creek tribes in South Dakota. This project's goal is to build a community-driven research partnership that focuses on prevention to address substance disorders in rural and tribal communities. The feature of this research is appreciating how history, culture, and unique local context plays a role in understanding how a particular community's experience affects substance use disorders and opioid abuse. This project is funded by federal funding. This funding has provided opportunities to hire community tribal facilitators directly from communities that we are partnering with, project coordinators, and also graduate students that are helping to conduct the research. This is a unique and very wide-ranging project that we're very proud of. And if you would like to know more about this project, there is a website that you can go to, www.opioid.umn.edu. So again, you can go to that website if you want to learn more about this very unique partnership that we have across states, but also with our tribal partners. The next project that I'd like to talk about is also a project that is in collaboration with the project that Michael Oakes described about fruit and vegetable growers in Minnesota. We have small and medium-sized fruit and vegetable growers in Minnesota. Many of them are coming from our diverse communities in rural areas, but also around the metro area. Many of these farmers are direct marketing directly to farmers markets, but also to small retailers. One of the challenges that these small and medium-sized fruit and vegetable growers have is that they do need to comply with all federal regulations when they are going to sell fruit and vegetables. The most recent federal regulation is the Federal Modernization Act, and all fruit and vegetable sellers need to comply with this federal regulation. So farmers are unique. This research is really directed to help farmers determine what parts of these rules apply to farms. In order for Extension to reach as many of these medium and small sized fruit and vegetable growers, that we have reached out to many of these diverse growers to help conduct the research and connect with many other growers by using multiple languages, including Spanish and Hmong. And this is a way to involve these farmers in the research that they can receive the critical information they need to really be part of this plan and also to learn about how these regulations apply to them. This project allows farmers to learn from each other and to improve their production practices. And ultimately, the goal of this research is how to best apply these federal regulations to their farms. With that, I again thank all of you for the opportunity today to learn a little bit more about Extension and our role in engaging our communities throughout the state in scholarship and also implementing and having these results being used throughout the state. So with that, Chair Davenport and members of the board, I thank you for this opportunity, and I will turn this presentation back to Provost Croson.
Thank you, Dean Durgan. Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. So I want to thank you all for your interest in engaged scholarship. We welcome your comments and discussions on any topics, but there's two questions that would be particularly helpful for us to consider as we move forward. So the first is, what else could or should we be doing to advance and support engaged scholarship? And the second is, what else could we be doing to better communicate about the engaged scholarship that we are already doing within the institution? And with that, I welcome your comments.
And thank you, Provost Croson and presenters. I really wish you were here. And I wish we had more time, but we got about 10 minutes for discussion. So who has questions or comments, please? Oh, Regent Poe.
Thanks, Chair Davenport, and thanks to the presenters. And I know that this capability was included in President Gable's strategic plan, but I have to admit that I really didn't fully understand it. But I mean, I really do appreciate the presentation, and I see the importance of it now. And particularly as it's clear that, you know, being capable in this area enables us to enhances our ability to win research awards, and it increases, you know, our effectiveness with those research projects. And so really my question is the question, Provost Croson, that you asked, you know, which is, you know, understanding that this is really an important part of many kinds of research. What is, you know, as you think about best in class, you know, or barriers to our, you know, going forward, or what would allow us to take another step forward in this? I mean, what might those kinds of things be? Because it seems, you know, to me clear that this is really a valuable capability that the university, we need to have, and we have developed it.
Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. Thank you, Regent Powell. So I'm going to ask Associate Vice President Furco to talk about sort of state of the art, our peers, and where we're maybe ahead and where we could enhance our activities.
AVP Furco.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent. Appreciate it. I would say that one of the things that we should be very proud of is that the University of Minnesota was out front very early in this initiative to really think about moving from being a university with engagement activities, which all universities can claim, to becoming an engaged university. And that involves taking a stock of our policies, of our infrastructure, of our culture here at the university, to really think about the role that community engagement plays across all parts of our mission. And it's this notion of reciprocity, mutual benefits, and working with communities that have made a difference. So we were very much out front, as I mentioned in my comments, around promotion and tenure for faculty. That was seen as a stumbling block in terms of what kinds of scholarship are valued. So I also, in terms of developing an engaged department program, which started in 2009, for example, we were out front in that regard. I also think about the President's Community Engaged Scholar Award, which elevates visibility for our scholars. We look, so the President's Community Engaged Scholar Award provides awards to a number of scholars. One is designated as the recipient of the Presidential Award and has their name on the Scholars Walk on the Twin Cities campus. So part of this has been what the university system-wide has sought to achieve. And we were one of the very few research universities in 2005 to receive the Carnegie Community Engagement designation when it was first established. So part of, I think, the work that we need to be attentive to is maintaining momentum in developing this trajectory of institutional transformation towards an engaged university. And I think given where we're located, especially in the Twin Cities campus and all that has happened around us in the last 15, 16 months, I think it's very important for us to really continue honoring that engaged work. And lastly, I just want to say that in terms of our students, this is very important. 84% of our undergraduate students say that they value opportunities to connect academic work with issues in the community. And the faculty who are most interested in this work are our faculty of color, our data show, as well as our junior faculty, the future of our university. So I think we're doing fairly well. I think there's, this is a big lift for a university that's as complex as this, but I value the work of our colleagues, Dean Durgan and Interim Vice President Olson, and many others, Vice Provost Lopers, and others who are part of this coalition to develop this effort.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Thank you, AVP Furco. There is much to be proud of. I can feel it from you, even though you're wherever you are. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. And I'm going to build on Regent Powell's comment and try to provide an example as a bit of but an inadequate answer to one of the questions that you raised. But it feels like some of the best work you're doing here is around, or at least a great example of this is around underserved or, less than ideal or suboptimal outcomes in healthcare at, in rural communities. And, but I think that tackling that comes with a challenge that we're not somehow saying to the providers that call those places home that, you're inadequate or somehow we've got all the answers. So that's a vexing challenge, but there's little more important, or it can't be much more important work we do than improving healthcare outcomes for everybody. So I'd love some feedback on how you walk that path, but at the same time, give you this example. So I don't think I've ever heard Aiken County mentioned in this room in 10 years. I mention it sometimes, but anyway, it's a big county, very, very rural, very poor. And I had the chance to spend some time in and around Riverwood Healthcare Center there, not because I was a patient or anything, my wife worked there. The number of times that people in the professional healthcare delivery staff that I had the chance to meet brought up our work on drugs, opiates, and this work in how do we improve outcomes was stunning. And if you're looking for an example or a place where I would say you're making a difference, that is exactly the sort of place, because that's a county with little economic activity outside of those big employers, whether it's a high school, a county courthouse, or a hospital. That's where the jobs are, and we're making a difference there. So I offered that as an example, but also would like to hear a little bit of commentary perhaps about how you tell a rural community provider, look, this isn't optimal. How do we say we can help, but not like we have all the answers? That's not an easy mission.
Good question.
Yes, Chair Davenport, Regent McMillan, thank you. That's a great insight, and I think this is exactly why the distinction between simply translational research, going and supplying people answers, to engaged research, where we're engaging the community on the questions that we're asking and the data we're collecting and the method by which those answers are arrived at, is so important. Because when you engage in engaged research, you are implicitly respecting and soliciting the input from these experts who really are experts in their area. I mean, they know many more things about what would work and what wouldn't work than the research experts do. And so it's really about approaching this research in that co-creation way, as opposed to simply arriving with a solution and trying to implement it.
It's good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Farnsworth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davenport. I was really impressed by this presentation, particularly as Regent Powell said, it's clear that we have a valuable capability that we've developed here as an institution, particularly how it's deeply embedded in faculty affairs, how engaged scholarship is supported within promotion and tenure. Just, very briefly in response to the second question, to the board, is I think we have an opportunity here to really embed this work within our diversity, equity, and inclusion work and how that's connected to community engagement. Not just, an immediate example comes to mind because of where we are, how we would engage in this work with the surrounding communities to the Twin Cities campus, but also there's very clearly many examples that we could talk about what that may look like throughout the system. So I think there's an opportunity here under Pathways and other areas to connect engaged scholarship more directly with our DEI work as an institution, but really appreciated the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth. Any closing comments in response before we move on? Anyone? All right, again, thank you to the presenters. I do wish you were here. I say that again, and hope we have more time in the future to look deeper into this topic. Thank you very much. Moving on then, we'll turn to item 3 on our agenda, a discussion of system undergraduate enrollment management. But Provost Croson, before I turn it over to you and the presenters, I would like to invite President Gable to make some introductory comments. President Gable.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the committee. Before I hand it off to the team, I just have a few landscape comments to provide. because of course system-wide enrollment has been a focus of the board for many years, since before this administration began in 2019. But we've made a lot of progress even during the challenging last few months. And what you're going to hear today for system-wide undergraduate enrollment highlights how all of us are working together in a commitment across the system to student success and to attracting, educating, and graduating students who represent the diversity, talent, workforce needs, and citizenships of the entire state of Minnesota and beyond for the future. So through the development of MPACT 2025, the university has prioritized this work through a construct called the System Strategic Enrollment Council, which reports to Provost Croson. And we're working across all 5 campuses in this council to meet the core strategic plan measures and metrics, including promoting cooperation around strategic enrollment management and admissions. Related to that, we're working on a cohesive story for prospective students, but that also captures the unique opportunities that students have on each campus. The council is working to recruit and retain diverse and representative students, reduce disparities in achievement and progress amongst those students, improve retention and graduation rates and gaps. And then with regard to financial barriers, there are several components: expanding scholarship opportunities, working to reduce student debt, and increasing targeted aid for students with the highest demonstrated need. Most critical to all of this, of course, is how the board looks at the accountability measures that are part of the dashboard. This has been refreshed with the new progress card that you approved last February. Using these accountability platforms, the council will be finishing their plan this fall, but there is a lot of work already completed and ready to be reported to you. And they're working hard this summer. And that is where I think we can hand it back over to the provost, Madam Chair, for an update.
Thank you, President Gable. Provost Croson.
Thank you, President Gable, Chair Davenport, and members of the board. Providing you with an update of the cross-campus collaborations toward optimizing system-wide undergraduate enrollment is a tradition at the June meeting. As President Gable mentioned, a few years ago, we formed the System-Wide Enrollment Council to share best practices, study enrollment trends, and identify paths for cooperation and shared success. Today, we have 2 representatives from that council, Dr. Robert McMaster and Dr. Jeffrey Ratliff Crane. Dr. McMaster has served as Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education on the Twin Cities campus since 2008. He joined the university in 1989 as Professor of Geography and has served as Associate Dean for Planning in the College of Liberal Arts, as well as Chair of the Department of Geography. Dr. Ratliff Crane has served as Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Innovation at the Rochester campus since 2018. He joined the Morris campus as a Professor of Psychology in 1989 and is a member of the Academy of Distinguished Teachers. And I have to say personally, in the last 14 months, I think I've been in more than 100 meetings with Dr. Ratliff Crane, and this is the first time we've been in the same room. So I want to thank them both for presenting today and also thank all of the members of the System Enrollment Council for their work. Chair Davenport, with your permission, I'd like to ask Vice Provost and Dean McMaster to begin.
Yes, please, welcome in person.
Great. Thank you, Chair Davenport and members of the board. There are many parts of the enrollment process that link directly to MPACT 2025. We list some of these in the docket material. Although the most obvious is the establishment of a system strategic enrollment plan, others relate to student success, including retention and graduation, many metrics around retention, graduation, increasing scholarship support, we'll talk a bit about that today, reducing debt, and increasing undergraduate research. The System Enrollment Council, as was mentioned, has been in place for approximately 5 years now. There were also some earlier, more informal efforts to get together and collaborate. The mission of the committee is to design, implement, evaluate, and continuously improve a comprehensive strategic enrollment plan for the University of Minnesota, system-wide. It also provides consultation on system-level decisions regarding budget, human resources, marketing, communications, internal programs, fundraising, and many other aspects of the comprehensive enrollment process. The membership of the council includes the vice chancellors, the vice provost and dean, at the Twin Cities campus, enrollment managers, and directors of admissions. The list is in your docket. And there are a whole set of other activities that the council engages in. We view strategic enrollment management as a comprehensive set of activities, including tuition strategies, admission strategies, and financial aid. But strategic enrollment management also includes a range of activities to support students, including first-year programs, advising, registration, all which lead to improved retention and graduation, which is the ultimate goal of enrollment management. It should be noted, and you can see it on this diagram, there are strong relationships among the components of strategic enrollment management. For instance, changing the non-resident tuition structure will likely lead to changes in non-resident enrollments and the need to increase financial aid. So there's interconnections among all of these entities. A major goal, as noted in this diagram, of the admissions process is to be attentive to the increasing diversity of Minnesota's high school graduates. We wanted to spend a bit of time here providing an update on some of the projections on the changing geodemographics that will impact our enrollments over the next 5 to 10 years. This United States map with Hawaii and Alaska misplaced is based on the newest WICHE, Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. That's a major source of data for higher ed that were recently updated. So you've seen some of these data before, but these are the brand new WICHE data that just were released and actually provide a new picture for us. The major change from the last projections include a declining population of high school graduates in the Western United States, where a drop of nearly 4% is expected. Both the Midwest at a 5% drop and the Northeast at a 5.5% drop also have projected declines in high school enrollments. The population winner in these projections is the South, where a 3% increase is expected, mostly coming from Texas and Florida, and I think also probably the Carolinas add to that increase as well. These trends indicate we will need to work even harder to maintain enrollments given the decline in our primary markets and pools. While WICHE data depicts the national landscape, we also monitor the projection of Minnesota high school graduates, obviously. We're in the middle of an increase with the highest point reaching approximately 72,120. That's a pretty precise number for a projection, but take it as you want. And around 2025, 26. There'll be a slight cliff in 2028, 29, declining to around 69,000, with a larger drop expected off in 2036 to 37. This is another change we've seen with the WICHE data in that the last projection showed a dramatic decline in about 5 years. And for Minnesota, that decline's been pushed off by about another 5 years, which I guess would be good news for this state, albeit for the entire upper Middle West, the projections are not as positive. A major concern of the Board of Regents and Minnesota legislature has been the access to the university for our greater Minnesota students. As expected, the depopulation of rural America is reflected with the red line on this graph, which indicates a longer-term decrease in greater Minnesota high school students, realizing that the suburb areas outside of the 7-county metro area fall into the greater Minnesota category, which biases these results somewhat. However, since 2015, the number of greater Minnesota high school graduates has actually been slightly increasing. The next section of our presentation will provide an update on some of the current enrollment trends for fall 2021. It should be noted that nearly all of these numbers will change as we progress through the summer. You've seen these changes before. Summer melt rates can vary from 5% to 10%, although a 10% melt rate would be at the very high end of that curve. This was experienced for the fall 2019 freshman class for some, but not all campuses. The final numbers are calculated on the 10th day of fall classes. And Provost Croson provides a comprehensive to the board shortly after that with all the enrollment data by campus freshmen, transfers by colleges. So shortly after the 10th day, we'll see the complete picture.
Okay. Good morning.
Please.
Morning. This figure depicts the system total enrollment for the past 20 years, and from 2001 to 2020. In the last decade, we have seen steady increases in system-wide undergraduate headcounts. Due to the pandemic, there was a slight dip in fall of 20. However, UMR, Rochester campus actually showed an increase. So again, a lot of variation in much of the data that we'll discuss. Based on the Board of Regents approved enrollment plan, the Twin Cities will increase to approximately 32,000 to 33,000 undergraduates by 2025. One of our challenges is to assure that this increase represents additional students to the whole, in particular, a larger proportion of the available Minnesota graduates, rather than a larger proportion of the same pool. Thank you. The risks and pivots during the 2020 to 2021 academic year have been our focus. For admissions teams, their efforts are always working for the future. The recruitment landscape for the fall 2021 and into fall 22 activities were and are the most uncertain any of us has experienced. For consistency, this table shows confirmations for fall 2021 as of May 17. And as has been pointed out, and I think it was worth repeating, these will change, and only for new high school students. Not included here are important other student populations, such as transfers and adult students. This is just a snapshot and will continue to change, as I mentioned, and we also need to monitor MELT, of course, during the summer. Despite an uncertain recruiting year, at this time, confirmations for fall 21 are at an all-time high for the Twin Cities campus, with UMD and Morris seeing increases, and compared to last year, and UMR again exceeding the 5-year average. As of this snapshot, the overall system total enrollment is up 12% for fall 2020. The campuses are attentive to, as our students reflect the wonderful diversity of the state of Minnesota, the campuses are attentive and remain attentive to the recruitment and enrollment of students from greater Minnesota. This table depicts the admit rates for all Minnesota residents, as well as the separate rates from the Twin Cities metro area and from greater Minnesota. The admission rates for metro and greater Minnesota regions are more similar than not, reflecting the importance of both to our system. As with all these data, admit rates do vary significantly from year to year. You'll hear that theme. As discussed with the Board of Regents previously, the national trend of declining transfer students continues into 2021. For the University of Minnesota, in large part, this is due to lower enrollments in Minnesota State community colleges, a trend that continues nationwide. As of mid-May, transfer confirms were down system-wide by 10% compared to last year. However, both UMD and UMR are up. They both saw increases, and transfer students tend to confirm through the summer, so we expect these numbers to improve. We next will turn our attention to where the campuses are cooperating in areas of admissions, marketing, financial aid, and the curriculum. The areas of cooperation and communication among all university campuses, admissions offices continue to deepen and grow. As noted here, admissions directors meet regularly to discuss application trends, results of the sharing of applications, including waitlist names from the Twin Cities, newest application technologies, and cooperation in recruitment, including recruitment fairs. These topics are also a primary focus of the system council meetings. One primary example of cooperation is the sharing of applications as another way to readily connect students to the right U for them. Share My App was created in 2007 to enable sharing of Twin Cities applications with greater Minnesota campuses. Students who apply to the UMTC are given the opportunity to share their application with one or more of the campuses. Each year, the System Enrollment Council analyzes and discusses the impact of Share My App and ways to be most strategic with the program. The downtick in shared applications from 2020 to 21, shown in the figure, was actually by strategy, with a goal to be more targeted to students who are more likely to confirm, saving effort among admission staffs. Despite the fluctuation in the Share My App numbers, the number of confirmations remain relatively stable over time. Thank you.
Another major area of cooperation is in the area of system recruitment. That's a relatively new effort. Over the past year, University Relations, in cooperation with the System Council and the Provost's Office, developed a pilot strategy for joint system recruitment. A major goal of the project was to articulate the uniqueness of each one of our 5 campuses. Often students apply to any campus in the U of M system are not aware of the various geographies, size, and foci of the other campuses. Students interested in a large R1 university in a metropolitan area obviously migrate to the Twin Cities, but many are not aware of the distinctiveness of the U of M Morris liberal arts focus or the U of M Duluth expertise in natural resources. There are videos of each campus that we can provide to the board that kind of highlight the essence of these campuses as part of this effort. Initial results were encouraging, including an uptick in applications from Minnesota residents and an increase in what we call stealth applications, or those are students that are not being tracked in the formal admissions databases. They find us on the web and then they apply. U Relations was encouraged by what was learned by this pilot project. And there's a lot behind this that we can't get into today. Clearly, the focus on digital approaches will continue given the declining use of print materials in the admissions world. Perhaps most importantly, we will continue to enhance the message that each of our 5 campuses provides a possible mission match for students. The pilot is continuing into the 2022 recruitment season. One emerging area of cooperation is around the need for additional financial resources, addressing the issue of affordability on our campuses. We're very pleased to report that after many years of planning, the U of M Promise Plus program, which builds on our successful Promise program, will provide free tuition, not fees, to any student system-wide with a family income less than $50,000 starting in fall 2021. We're actually packaging those Promise Plus students as we speak for this fall. This program is very similar to the University of Wisconsin's Bucky Promise or University of Michigan's Go Blue, programs that also provide free tuition for undergraduates. Our hope is to expand the Promise Plus program to include transfer students in the next few years. We were unable to do that in the first pass. Also supporting our low-income students is the newly established Benson Scholarship Match Program. The University of Minnesota Foundation secured a major gift from the Benson Foundation, the Benson Scholarship Match, for the support of our Pell-eligible low-income students. 24 gifts so far, totaling more than $6 million with gift and match, have already been established. This program will have a significant and lasting impact on the success of our lowest income students across the system. For the support of these students on the Twin Cities campus, we've hired 2 low-income coaches whose role is to provide mentoring for both our first generation and Pell students. Another system-wide scholarship effort, the Fall 2020 Recruitment Scholarship, called the 2020 Scholarship, where students received $2,020, very clever, was piloted for the fall class, where new dollars were identified to assist recruitment efforts given the uncertainty related to the pandemic. I think everybody realizes how edgy and almost panicky we were about enrollments about a year ago at this time. This initiative demonstrates how the campuses can create and operationalize a program on short notice. Retention from fall 20 to spring 21 was strong on all campuses. We've seen a slight dip for fall to fall retention, but our staff are reaching out to those students to, of course, try to bump those numbers up. There are several areas where the campuses cooperate around the curriculum, including the Minnesota Transfer Curriculum, which is a massive program to ensure that students can transfer seamlessly between and among all public universities in the state, as well as the internal U of M transfer process, test transfer evaluation system to facilitate easier transfer between and among our 5 campuses. And then the multi-I program where students may take courses on any campus. Multi-institutional or multi-I enrollment highlights cooperation in the curriculum space. The table on this slide shows the multi-I enrollments on each campus for the most recent year. They're not enormous, but we do see students that are able to. The multi-I courses we can see are very high for Crookston, given the distinctiveness of that. It should not be surprising that some of our students start on one of their campuses and graduate from another of the 4. These students are labeled IUTs or intra-university transfers. I won't belabor the numbers on this graph. You can kind of see them. But basically, if you look for the Twin Cities, the lowest row here, 81 of the students who started on Twin Cities graduated from U of M Duluth. We, based on IPED's definitions, cannot include these students in our normal graduation rates, but we calculate a separate graduation rate for them. And finally, I'll turn it back to Jeff for a discussion of the enrollment plan.
Yeah. Vice Chancellor Brett Crane.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. To close, in recognition of the continually changing enrollment landscape, we want to note the System Enrollment Council's major next task, a system strategic enrollment plan as specified in the Impact 2025. This is in addition to the individual campus enrollment plans this board has already reviewed and approved. The council will take concentrated time this summer to focus on the content areas listed in the left-hand side of the slide and using the masses of data available to us to provide the framework for that plan. A draft will then be available for input and feedback with a final report presented to this board in December.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. Thank you, board. Thank you, presenters, especially for not only this presentation, but all the work that I know you have done behind the scenes over the last 5-6 years to increase our systemness.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster and Vice Chancellor Ratliff Green. And I want to especially thank you for the data that you presented. I think that's more reliable than a crystal ball. And remind ourselves that in our fall meeting, we will get the real numbers after the 15th, is that right? 10th day. Better than that. So open it up for discussion, questions, comments. Regent McMillan, and then Regent Swiggum.
Thank you, Chair Davenport. Good stuff, and I'm a broken record in a complimentary sense with this following statement, and that is this just is so vital that we do this at a system level. And thank you, President Gable, for making that commitment, and to the two of you and Provost Croson, because the downstream impacts, just getting our hands around them as this campus flexes its enrollment muscle. We just have to understand that, and it's a good and a bad story. It's getting better, and I just am so grateful that we're having a conversation in this room about all campus implications. So with that aside, I'm hoping, I don't care if you put the numbers back up there, but Vice Provost McMaster, you got to the heart of the issue with the changing data and pushing out our decline in Minnesota 5 to 10 years, or from the 0 to 5 to the 5 to 10. And as I think about how this board helps this administration create priorities, we all want to see more Minnesotans in our classrooms here. I tend to look at that as that's probably going to mean more Minnesotans on our system campuses and as many as we can get here. But, you know, what is it, 65, 68% here, and then at places like UMD, it's 80 to 85% Minnesotans. But I really want to understand, and maybe not today, but just know that you're in the thick of that. What does that data tell us? And is your generalization what we should take away from a strategic input standpoint, or is there more refinement needed to really get under the hood of what's happening to Minnesota graduate rates? And it looks to me like we might want to chase harder for the next 5 years to land as many as we can while we're still climbing, and then prepare ourselves to fill in the gaps as that number goes down, knowing all along the other rest of the country that's declining as well is going to be chasing our students right and left, our best and brightest. So I'm just curious if you got everything said you wanted to say in your 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 analysis there, if there's more we should be thinking about, because it's really important data.
Vice Provost.
Sure, Chair Davenport and Regent McMillan and board members. There's a lot packed into that question, of course. And so I'll just kind of pull some thoughts out of my head here. One is, in terms of Minnesota, as we look at those numbers, the diversity is going to climb exponentially. And so we're going to have to be extremely attentive to first generation Pell eligible BIPOC students within our recruitment efforts for Minnesota, also within the region. And we're going to have to be attentive to the kinds of programs and support we can provide as these students enter into any of the 5 campuses. So the landscape within Minnesota will be heavily dependent on a shift to increasing diversity within the high school class. And we've seen this already. Last year, within our freshman class in the Twin Cities, we enrolled 28% students of color and American Indian students, which was almost spot on in terms of high school graduates. It was an interesting comparison. That number is going to climb, and we're going to have to constantly look back to see, are we reflecting the diversity in the high school class? I think you've heard me say that before. I think we're going to have to be very attentive to national level recruitment, given these numbers over the long haul. And we do have regional recruiters out, the Twin Cities does, and some of the other campuses. We recruit in California, we recruit on the East Coast, we're going to be recruiting in the Northwest United States. We're constantly looking at our geographies because we need to maintain those national pipelines. All the R1s play this game, and so we're in that same boat as well. So another piece of this is how we balance kind of our Minnesota enrollments with our out-of-state enrollments. And the other piece of this is international. And there's a lot of uncertainty now with international enrollments because of what's happened over the last few years. As you know, we saw a precipitous drop last fall. We've recovered somewhat. In terms of confirms, we're almost even with last year, which I'm really surprised to see. But do we continue that push for international students, given the fragility that we've seen over the last few years with that particular market? So I guess I think of this both in terms of the local geodemographics and the shifting race and ethnicity within our state, and also within the multiple geographies which we recruit.
Regent McMillan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davenport. Very quick follow-up. So should I then interpret the increasing diversity within that 0 to 5 year growing enrollment as a clarion call from the administration to us that we're going to have to invest more to make those students successful in terms of getting through and holding 4-year graduation rates, things like that? Is that what I should hear?
Chair Davenport and Regent McMillan, spot on. Absolutely. That's why I think I mentioned for the Pell eligible students, for instance, we just hired 2 coaches that will focus on helping those students kind of manage the curriculum and be successful.
Thank you. Regent Sviggum.
Madam Chair, Vice Provost McMaster, I think you anticipate my question because you've heard it before, and I'm ready to move on to something else in life. But first of all, let me compliment you on the great direction that we have come as a system. With the Share My App, the waitlist sharing that we're doing, the system recruitment, which you mentioned, all I think absolutely wonderful for the system. I've asked you a couple, 3 times before about some type of a guarantee. And I was not aware of the system transfer process that you mentioned, but I see it as such a small step from the system transfer process to just saying to a student, you know, we maybe not going to get you into Minneapolis, the main course system here, the first year, but if you go to one of our systems and you prove yourself, you perform in the classroom, we'll guarantee you a spot in a year or two at Minneapolis St. Paul. We're not quite there yet. Just tell me it's not a wise decision. Tell me it's not wise. I'll move on to something else. You have come so far in the 4 years I've been here. I compliment you as a system. We really have come a long ways. But the one more step, that guarantee, is that totally out of bounds? I've mentioned it to you 3 or 4 times, and like I say, I'm ready to move on to something else. I don't need to dwell on that anymore, and McMillan doesn't have to hear about it anymore. So tell me it's a not wise decision and to make that final step, and I'll move on to something else.
Vice Provost.
Chair Davenport and Regent Swigum, oh, that's so tempting to say that. It is an intriguing idea.
I don't give those words that open invitation. I don't give that to my wife, so because I know what the response would be.
It's an intriguing idea, and I mean that with all sincerity. And we have in the System Council talked about various ways of better harmonizing the curriculum and transfer. One of the ideas is, could we, and I'm leading up to your question, one of the ideas is, could we better harmonize the general education, liberal education curriculum at the 1,000, 2,000 level to facilitate an easier transfer? So the economics course at Crookston is the exact same economics course on the Twin Cities and Morris, and you don't even have to worry about transfer, you have the course. That would certainly help initially, and I'd like my colleague to comment on this from the Greater Minnesota campus perspective. It certainly would probably help at the front end in terms of attracting students to those campuses. But if a high percentage of students left, and I think our provost has some examples of where she feels they would not leave, they'd stay, would that hurt the campuses in the long run? Mm-hmm. So if 10% of the students who went to Crookston thinking they're coming to the Twin Cities, and they did leave after the second year to come down, their enrollments dropped 10%. Is that a healthy decision for them? That's the struggle and tension we have with that particular plan.
Madam Chair, and I know I'm all wet on this, but it's such a small step from the system transfer process which we've initiated. You've come so far. And again, my feeling is that student that wants to be here at this campus where we're sitting right now, once she gets to Duluth, she's going to stay at Duluth. Yeah. That's my personal strong feeling there. Once she gets to Crookston, he's going to stay at Crookston. Yeah. And I believe that in my heart. I don't know that that's certainly not true for everybody, but for a great percentage it would be. So. Yeah. I compliment you on looking at the system enrollment, which you've really, really done the last 4 or 5 years. And Bob, thanks. Sure.
Vice Chancellor, did you have a comment and follow up?
Yes, thank you. Chair Davenport, Regent Swigum. As Bob had intimated, it's an interesting question. One of the first things that comes to my mind is the unique nature of each of the campuses. And from a student-focused point of view, the strengthening the match up front, and again, the right you for you, part of this campaign that we're really working on right now, strikes me as remains a primary focus for getting students to the right place, a place where they're going to thrive, where they're going to really contribute, where they're going to really add overall to the community in the long run. And the possibility of a student really intending to be at one campus but starting at another disrupts some of that flow, that advising. Now, I say that in full recognition, the Rochester campus, we're deliberately set up where our students do in their final year take even the majority of their classes or their experiences on often the Twin Cities campus. They're completing their UMR degree while they are, getting some of that benefit of what some of the other campuses might offer. So there might be other ways for students to be part of the university, be connected with what becomes and legitimately needs to be their home campus. But looking at our budget models, looking at other means to break down barriers where they can take advantage of the multiple campuses rather than an idea that they necessarily abandon the one campus in order to move to another campus. So I think there's multiple ways to try to reach the ideal that you're referring to.
Madam Chair, just very, very quickly, thank you to both of you. I am not unsatisfied. I am very satisfied with the way that we are moving towards a system approach of all the 5 campuses. Again, I compliment you, and you won't hear from me again. But there's just one small step that would really, really make me happy if we were to move.
Thank you, Regent Swigum. We have Regent Rocha, Powell, and Hebsch.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Davenport. And this kind of dovetails off of what Regent Swigum was just talking about. And in the 20-some years ago, we went through the process of creating the 2+2 program with all institutions in the state. And I know as a legislative leader, you were very much part of that as well as Speaker and Minority Leader, I think, at that point. But we had a real issue because at Morris, you had a 4-credit Econ 101 and a 3-credit or a 5-credit. I mean, they didn't align at all, and they literally weren't providing credit. You had to take the course over again. So that was really a big disincentive. And so the state, through what was then the Higher Education Coordinating Board, really pushed to get among all campuses, public campuses, so that you'd have this more convenient push through. Thank you. This is a fantastic data set, and I was kind of doing some calculations, and I see that even like on the Twin Cities, there is a higher admit rate for Minnesota students who apply than students generally who apply. And obviously, when you think of the mission of the school, that is understandable. But when I look at across the system campuses, and this is a bit of a reflection on the comments that Regent Swigum was just making, I don't have that same confidence, and I don't think the data bears out that there's this perfect concept of somebody that gets on the campus. I mean, we have a lot of transfers that are coming in, and I think for a lot of students, it may be a function of we don't have a general college anymore or a university college. So you can't be admitted outside of a degree granting program on the Twin Cities. So you go to another Minnesota U of M school, and then you apply in as a transfer the following year when those scores don't, the earlier scores don't have an impact. And that's, I think it's hard on the campuses to plan for that kind of departure. It's hard on students to make that transition. So, from my standpoint, I don't think that they're perfect substitutes. And a lot of it is cultural. Far more students are coming from populated areas, and they're not necessarily as comfortable moving into a smaller community with a small campus and so on. I think that's something that's my broken record, Regent Swigum, talking about how we have a real challenge there. My big concern there is that there's not enough price differentiation between our system campuses and the Twin Cities campus. And it's just simply a matter of consumer preference. We know that this is the type of education that is really succeeding. It's across the nation, all the R1s that you referred to, Vice Provost McMaster. And so and if you look at the other regionals in the area, they're priced differently. They're priced lower. And so that I believe that if somebody goes to one of our system campuses, and by the way, they're saving $5,000 or $6,000 a year tuition, I think that makes it much more likely that they would continue in that program as opposed to if there's not a great price differentiation transferring when they have that opportunity. So what would really help me here when we look at these trends and when you look at the challenges, and we've talked about at this board about the 2,000 Minnesota students that leave the state for college, which is surprising because we have such an amazing higher education system here, but we just have so many quality prepared students coming out of high school that we're an exporter of students. I want to know about them. I want to analyze that 2,000 students and understand why are they choosing. Some of them may be legacy, but why are they choosing to leave the state? Is it, I can theorize a lot of different reasons why, but that's going to go a long way toward explaining, why is a student jumping over to a North Dakota school rather than going to Crookston, or why are they popping down to South Dakota rather than going to Morris? And I don't, how the state necessarily measures that. I think it's tough, but that I think would go a long way toward explaining how we keep enrollment up at all these campuses, or trying to improve it in situations where we're struggling. I'll stop my remarks there. but I can ask a question. Morris has the lowest admit rate. Am I right on that? There was one that was in the 60s where the others were 70s and higher.
Let me look at the table. Is this the table with the greater Minnesota? And,
I thought it was across the board. Yeah, here it is. On the fall 2020 freshman admit rate by geography, and it's 67 and 65. And, and it seems like Morris has capacity for more students. Enrollment is down. What would cause a lower admit rate when you have a campus that certainly has the capacity to admit more students?
And that slide on page 70 of your packet.
Chair Davenport and Regent Rocha, I believe we have somebody from Morris who we can ask about their yield rates. We're not responsible on our campus, of course, for their yield rates or their admit rates. So sure. That might be a place where we call on a friend.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll get them on the phone. And while we do that, Regent Powell, please.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, and thank you, Vice Provost and Vice Chancellor. It sounds like you have sort of a growing conviction about using, paid search, digital, and so I'm focusing on recruiting here, and I understand that recruiting isn't the only part of enrollment management, and I understand that fully, and no disagreements with it, but I want to, since I'm basically a marketing guy, I want to focus on the recruiting piece. And I guess the question is, we heard you say that's, you have really increased conviction around that. We heard Chancellor Holtz-Claus in her presentation talk about, that that's quite effective. More would be better. If we could, more would be better. Also in the mix, we have the Driven campaign, which is more of a media campaign, and I think designed to have, among other things, a broader reputational impact. A good thing. But so the question is, we have these different elements, and is there a sense of, do we have the right mix now? Are we spending enough on these recruiting tools now to get us where we want to go? And are we spending it, as we learn more, are we spending it in the right way? Or are we going to be sort of repositioning that to have the maximum impact?
Go ahead, whichever would like to answer that.
I can jump in. So Regent Powell and Chair Davenport, a couple of thoughts. Obviously, this last year forced us almost entirely into a digital realm. Yep. And the feedback from our admissions directors is really highlighted the loss of being, in person at recruitment fairs. This is a space where people will stumble upon perhaps a school they weren't necessarily looking for, which is in a digital space, unless you're being very intrusive, it is geared more towards individuals seeking out something. And I think we've seen this nationwide. What starts to play out is that the schools with high name recognition and reputation did very well this year. The others had to work a lot harder because, there's so much clutter, there's so much work to get through that, and the digital landscape can end up working against that. So absolutely a mix. What we're definitely seeing amongst our admissions folks and the work with marketing is, continually keeping tabs on the the sophomores, juniors, their families, and adjusting those campaigns. This digital campaign that was initiated this past year did raise that visibility, and I think is well worth continuing in that investment. But it's definitely in my view, a view of this and continuing to make sure we invest very heavily in the one-on-one, the personal input. The lack of ability for students to do campus visits hurt us. It's getting students and their families on campus. It's creating those relationships. And so digital world is an important piece, maybe to open the door, unlock it, but the other pieces, really are what's necessary to close the deal.
Chair Davenport and Regent Powell, just a couple other comments. One is a large part of our success on the Twin Cities campus is based on our direct marketing. We pay a direct marketer, EAB, a lot of money to market the University of Minnesota nationally. And a large percentage of our applications come in because of the work that's done there, as with all of our peers. So that's an essential component of our marketing plan, is that kind of formal relationship with a professional company. But the work now that is being done with university relations, this kind of secondary campaign, is going to be really important for the synergy among the system campuses to try to better market the difference between a Morris and a Twin Cities and a Rochester. So I think there are two components to it at two different scales. One is the direct marketing firms that we work with, and the other is the work that UR is doing, that are both critical for our success.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're waiting. We'll let you have the closing comment question. Okay. Regent Hips.
Madam Chair and Vice Provost, Vice Chancellor. I'm a product of Morris. I went there for a year and a half, then I transferred to St. Paul campus. So I would like to pile on with what Regent Sviggum was talking about. I think at the time I went to Morris, I wasn't ready for the Minneapolis. I'm halfway between Morris and Crookston, so we have an awful lot of kids out there that are really good kids, but they're not ready to go to the Twin Cities yet. There's a lot of Twin Cities kids that aren't ready to go to rural areas yet, and it's like, we'll give them 1 or 2 years. So I'm all for a guaranteed transfer as long as you can make the cut. But I think that maturity level and just going from Perm to Morris was a big move for me. I don't know, you can say if it worked or not, I don't know. They had a Hardee's, we didn't even have a Hardee's, so that was a big deal. So, anyway, I'm all for that. And secondly, to add on to Regent Powell's comments on marketing, I mean, small business in rural Minnesota will spend more than the Crookston campus spends on marketing. And so we need to take that into consideration, because we've got the border schools that are spending a lot of money, and those are the kids that, if they don't go to the Minnesota schools and they go to the border schools and then they become leaders in those small communities and they don't have the love for Minnesota that I have. It's a generational thing, and I think we need to consider that as well. It's a long-term game, so thank you.
Thank you, Regent Hips, and it was well worth it. We're glad to have you as an alum and as a regent. So now we'll go back to Regent Rocha's question, and we're looking at slide in our packet. It's on page 70 about admit rates by geography. There's a little footnote at the bottom of that, but we have Melissa Burt from Morris on the line. And welcome, Melissa. Did I get your question right, Regent Rocha, or please restate it?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, there's a couple of things. As I was, kind of looking through the math, so Morris has a Minnesota admit rate of 66.4%, which is the lowest among the campuses, but there's also a drop off in new students coming in. I would also note that by the calculation of the apps and the admits on the previous slide, the overall admit rate is a 76.54, which is quite a bit higher than the Minnesota admit rate. And I'm just kind of curious as to what's the dynamic? How do we explain those differences?
Dr. Burt.
Thank you, Chair Davenport and Regent Rocha. Thank you for your question. And as a data person, this slide I had some comments about, so I am glad that you were paying attention. So actually, if you look at that footnote, I think that's an important piece to take a look at. So that, and unfortunately, I don't have the slides pulled up, but I believe it's divided by the total number of applications, not the total number of complete applications. So what you're seeing there is not the number of students who we actually have an opportunity to admit or not. But it's based on the number of total applications that we're receiving. And so our actual percentage of students that are enrolled at Morris. For this last year, we had 36% from the Twin Cities and surrounding area and 41% from greater Minnesota. So the number of students that actually enroll at Morris, traditionally, we've had a larger percentage from outside of the Twin Cities than within the Twin Cities. And in terms of the Regent Rocha, you've mentioned in previous meetings that perhaps we need to expand our range of who we're admitting. And I think we had a real opportunity this year without requiring the ACT or SAT to really look at student academic experience and consider those 4 years of work as we admitted students. And so I think that we'll have a slight shift, and we're seeing that reflected also in our good-looking numbers for the fall. And so that's what I've got for that. Do you have a follow-up question?
Go ahead, Regent Roshan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not really. I'm catching now that I wasn't tracking that total apps meant incomplete apps. And just from an analysis standpoint, it'd be nice if they have them all the same, so that because we've got apples and oranges on here, so it throws me off a little bit. But I'm very happy to hear that you're pursuing the opportunity for others, and both in the interest of the campus and our economics, but also in the interest of those students, giving them an opportunity to succeed at what is an excellent educational institution. So I thank you for that follow-up.
Thank you, Regent Roshan. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you, Melissa, for being on the line. And we'll close this discussion and move on to our next agenda item. Oh, I'm sorry. I take that back. Student Representative Whitcup has a quick question.
This is not necessarily a question, but a quick comment as a Morris student. We also attract a lot of nationwide students due to the tuition waiver. It's an opportunity for our Native students nationwide to get an affordable and accessible education that they may not have local to them. So while we may not be bringing in our proud Minnesotans, we're creating proud Minnesotans that are really glad to have opportunities like that in Minnesota, and really from the experience that I've had with lots of my friends in Morris, are really glad to be there and love being in this place, and really fall in love with Minnesota, and a lot of them are likely to stay. And so I think that that's also contributing to Morris's perceived lower amount of Minnesota students.
Very good. Thank you, Student Representative Whitcup. Now we'll move on. Our next agenda item is the consent report. And Provost Croson, would you please provide a brief introduction of the items in the consent report? And let me know if you have a question for anyone.
Super. Thank you, Chair Davenport and members of the board. There are 3 items for your approval in this month's consent report. The first item is our regular request for approval of new and changed programs. New program proposals on the Twin Cities campus include a MPH degree in public health data science and a graduate minor in climate change in the School of Public Health, a post-baccalaureate certificate in learning sciences in the College of Education and Human Development, and an undergraduate certificate in long-term care management in the College of Continuing and Professional Studies. A summary of other requested changes includes program name changes in the College of Liberal Arts to align with departmental name changes, and a residency program name change in the medical school. The second item is a request to change the name of the College of Liberal Arts on the Duluth campus to the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. This request stems from the merging of the School of Fine Arts and the College of Liberal Arts in 2020, and is the product of a thorough consultative process involving faculty, staff, and students. The third item in the consent report is a request for approval of 2 faculty appointments with tenure. Those appointments are for Dr. Kristen Mark, professor with tenure, Department of Family Medicine and Community Health in the medical school, and Dr. Melissa Green, associate professor with tenure in the Department of Aerospace Engineering and Mechanics in the College of Science and Engineering. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I recommend this report for your consent.
Thank you, Provost Croson. Is there a motion to approve the consent report?
I'll move it.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion
I have a question, Madam Chair.
or question? Regent Rocha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would, certainly be interested in Regent Kenyania's feedback on the change of the college in Duluth. It seems like a pretty big deal, and then it's kind of exciting that they're reaching that point. I did want to ask a question. So with creating a graduate minor in climate change and health, is there a major of that variety in that college already?
Regent Davenport, Regent Rocha, I'm not sure, but I can certainly find out and get back to you.
The only thing I was a bit surprised with the name. I thought because it's such a hot topic, and I would have thought that it's something like climate impacts or climate science and health, because when a person comes in with the name that already has sort of this large political context to it, it might affect the perception of expertise as opposed to advocacy. And so that I was just interested in that. I certainly don't object to it. I mean, I trust the faculty in our shared governance model to do this, but that was just a comment that I would put out there, that I would hope that it wouldn't impact the impact of that credential for being able to communicate about that very important issue going forward with the community. So just a comment for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. And Regent Kenyania, did you want to comment or have a question?
I don't know if I wanted to, but I was just shocked that they didn't call it the Kenyania School of Arts. A bit of a bummer there, but no, I mean, I trust that there was a consultative process, and that's what the leadership's recommending. So look forward to supporting the newly renamed College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Regent Kenyania. And maybe after you make that first 50 million donation, they'll name the building after you. All right, it's been moved and seconded. And again, we'll take a voice vote. All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The consent report is approved. Last item, information items. Provost Croson.
Thank you, Chair Davenport, members of the board. This information item in your June docket includes a regular report of select student, faculty, and staff accomplishments. I want to highlight just a few of those today. The Carlson School of Management has created a $50 million endowed scholarship. The Carlson Centennial Scholars Program, funded by 15 donors, will attract, retain, and train top performing student scholars on all levels. The School of Public Health received a 5-year, $10 million award to lead the Midwest Consortium for Hazardous Waste Worker Training. This consortium is one of 18 centers in the United States funded by the National Institute of Environmental Health Science Worker Training Program. Ann Masters, professor in the Institute for Child Development on the Twin Cities campus, was elected to the 2021 class of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Tanisha Fazal, professor in the Department of Political Science in the College of Liberal Arts, was named one of 26 Andrew Carnegie 2021 Fellows. She'll receive a $200,000 stipend to support her research. Law school professor Joan Howland is a recipient of the 2021 prestigious Robert J. Kutak Award, given by the American Bar Association to those who have made contributions to the collaboration between the Academy, the bench, and the bar. Ryan Caberly, assistant professor in the College of Science and Engineering, received an award from the Department of Defense established program to stimulate competitive research. His project will develop models to improve control of hypersonic systems to guarantee airworthiness during testing. And finally, Isaiah Nielsen, the University of Minnesota Morris undergraduate, received the Critical Language Scholarship, a program offered by the U.S. government to expand the number of Americans studying foreign language. Please join me in acknowledging the amazing accomplishments of our faculty, students, and staff. This concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate all those you mentioned, and I know they're just examples of the many accomplishments we have throughout our system. Again, you'll hear me say this 100 times, much to be proud of. So with that, thank you, everyone. Regent Powell.
Just a very quick comment. I just lost my, anyway, the comment would be, I don't know how many of you noticed or followed the debate in the Senate over the last few days, creating a very, very significant competitiveness fund. It's $250 billion, and it's really just recognizing that there are other places around the world that are investing increasingly in higher education and technology, and so this was quite a bipartisan vote in the Senate to increase massively the amount of money that the federal government is investing in technology, and and in that same light, we should I think acknowledge that President Gabel will be the vice chair of the National Institute on the Council on Competitiveness, which is a critical nonprofit council that will have a seat at the table as we continue to have this debate on investment in R&D, and we're delighted that President Gabel, we and she, will be at the table as this debate continues to unfold.
Thank you for adding that, Regent Powell. And indeed, that's a big seat at the table, and so we're happy to have you there and proud of the recognition received for that. There being no additional business, let me just check. No additional business before the committee. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
And we will reconvene at 11:30, I believe, in the West Committee room. Will we reconvene as a board? Did we say
11:30. Chair Powell, do you see how even a new interim